today. I'll tell you what, today I have a person who is so well-rounded. It's like, it sounds like he's a point guard, he's a guard, he's a center. It's like all around. And I'm so looking forward to this interview. Brett, thank you so much for being with us. Brett Swarts.
Ishai, a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to adding some value to you and your listeners.
I look forward to that. I'll tell you what, before we even start, because we have so much to talk about, I read your profile, and before I ramble about you and I go on and on about your experience, give us before we even start, give us a 2-minute elevator pitch about what your business is today.
We help people defer capital gains taxes on the sale of highly appreciated assets, not using a 1031 exchange. And most people know 1031 exchange, but they don't know how to defer taxes on crypto, primary homes, businesses. And they really struggle and get frustrated with exiting. These highly appreciated businesses have huge estate tax, have large capital gains tax, and they're looking for some freedom and some flexibility on the way that they can exit and access that capital or be able to invest into and build wealth with it. And so we help people map out those plans, use a particular DST, not the one you're thinking of probably. It's called a Deferred Sales Trust. And we find that it provides some freedoms for people that they're really looking for. And we love it because it helps them create and preserve more wealth.
That's awesome. Gives us such an amazing thing. A lot of stuff to talk about. You know what? Before we go and dig into this, this whole world of tax and deferment, meaning and the DST, and there's so much I want to know about. But before that, give us a little bit. Let's go back in time. Let's go back in time. Let's see, where did you get into real estate and got into this whole taxation business? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I fell in love with real estate at a young age with my mom and my dad and my brother building homes in the Bay Area of California, Silicon Valley. And we built lots of homes and had a chance to see cash flow and how to be an entrepreneur, how to be a business owner, how to develop something from the ground up. And fast forward, had a chance to study and practice multifamily brokerage at a place called Marcus and Millichap, where we learned the fundamentals of underwriting, cap rates and IRRs and cash flows and 1031 exchanges and adding value, negotiating, really just becoming a commercial real estate advisor, if you will, an expert in numbers and deals. And, we fell in love with the 1031 exchange because of what it could do, but then it found out that it wasn't always our friend. And sometimes it can put you in a position where you're overpaying for properties. And that was especially found out in 2008. So I started in 2006 at Marcus and Millichap, and in 2008, the market obviously took a big hit. And during that time period, friends, family, and clients lost half or everything. And that was kind of the opening moment of like, there's got to be a better way. We can't just go back to just the old ways of doing things, which tend to be honestly lack of freedom, right? Lack of flexibility. So at the same time, I was just getting started in the business. My wife and I had a baby on the way, and we were barely surviving, if you will, because I was 100% commission, and she was full-time home with our daughter. And so we had a decision to make, and the decision was essentially, Brett, go get a real job, and a real job meaning an hourly job, not based upon commission, or Brett, go work multiple jobs on the weekends and keep your commission, 100% commission multifamily broker career going. And that began the journey of working at Cheesecake Factory by night. And then by day, I would talk to clients, negotiate with banks, and help them structure their properties in a better position to get through the 2008 crash. And it was during this time that we learned about the Deferred Sales Trust. And that became the new thing to do or new thing to explore. And like most people hearing about it for the first time, we thought it was too good to be true. But if it was true and it worked, this would change the way that we would forever trade in and out of real estate. And so fast forward, we launched our company 5 years ago, and I've helped, clients, friends, family, and I work with professionals across the country to help them understand the simplicity and the elegance of what this offers, so they don't have to feel trapped by capital gains tax when exiting highly appreciated assets. And so my wife and I have 5 kids now. I was able to retire from the Cheesecake Factory And now I've got a chance to sit down with professionals like yourself to explore what the Deferred Sales Trust can do for them and their clients.
I love the story. Beautiful. I want to go back to one point, very, very interesting to me. The point where you found out about DST, about the first sale tax, and the moment that was the aha moment, and you said, "Oh my gosh," what was that moment? Tell us a little bit about about the revealed, this thing, that eureka moment.
Yeah, you have to start with the pain, And so one of my particular clients, he had $50 million of investment real estate, and he was leveraged about 80%, and he had done multiple 1031 exchanges. So we had a very low basis, and he owned a lot of C-class assets. And this is in 2000, early 2007. We were saying, hey, now's a good time to trade, to maybe get into a little more stable assets, maybe pay down some of your debt. And he goes, guys, I can't. He goes, I've done multiple 1031 exchanges. I have a lot of debt, and I don't want to overpay for property, so I'm just going to hold on. And that began the beginning of the end, because over the next 3 years, he lost everything. He lost all $50 million worth of real estate because he had too much debt, not enough liquidity, and not enough diversification. And our parents taught us to sell high and buy low. They didn't teach us to sell high and buy higher 180 days later, especially what we're seeing right now, right? We're seeing cap rates that are, maybe going down, maybe going up a little bit, right? But we're seeing interest rates that have about doubled in the past year. And so you go, does it make sense? The inverse doesn't make sense. The negative arbitrage doesn't make sense. But in that time, it didn't make sense for a number of reasons to 1031 either. But he took no action because he felt he had no option because of the capital gains tax. And in California and New York, our main places where we're from, that is, about 40% state, federal, Obamacare, and depreciation recapture. 40% is a pretty good number on the gain. And so what happened? He lost everything. And so I saw the blood in the streets in Sacramento in particular. It's a really boom and bust type of city. It goes really high, really hot, really fast, and it tends to go down faster than like a San Francisco or Los Angeles or San Diego, because it's more of a secondary type of a city, if you will. That being said, he lost it all. So we said there's got to be a better way. We hear this over and over and over again from people who say, hey, I love the 1031, but you need to find that deal before I sell as a broker, or you need to line it up before I won't trade, or they're running out of time and there's 10 days left to identify and they're scrambling. And it's like they have a gun to their head to purchase, and the seller knows it, and the seller just holds them hostage. Now, as brokers, guess what? Most brokers don't want you to know about the Deferred Sales Trust or even the 1031 companies, because they want to keep you in that 1031 transaction loop, right? But it became very apparent that 1031 exchange was Blockbuster, and it was not Netflix. And when all of the pain happened, and so he said, if there is a better way, if there's even a possibility, it is our kind of responsibility and our stewardship to know about this. We're supposed to be the best type of commercial real estate brokers to help our clients. And if we're going to serve them at the highest level, we've got to vet and look at these opportunities to see if it's going to be a good fit for them. Now, let them decide. And people laughed at me. People said, what are you wasting your time on? And it was funny because the Marcus and Millichap broker who brought in the gentleman who's one of my strategic alliances now to speak on this, and train us on this, he brought it into 30 agents. We all sat there listening to the same presentation. There was only 2 of us that really actually took action, right? And that's another kind of concept here. And part of it was because a lot of people are used to the status quo, or they don't want to rock the boat with presenting new ideas. They just want to keep the transactions flowing. But I said, this is too big. Like, if this is real, this will change everything. And so that's what it was. I was more curious and open-minded. And I began calling CPAs, calling owners, but it's like the prophet is not accepted in his hometown. Have you ever heard that before? I was like the guy that wasn't a CPA, wasn't a tax attorney. I was just a broker who knew 1031 exchanges. So a lot of people honestly just either just dismissed it or said, tell you what, It sounds kind of cool. Come back to us when you've closed some deals. But in the meantime,
you're looking for someone more authoritative, right?
Or just come back when deals have closed, or come back when my value of my property is now 50% higher, because it just cut in half, or just cut in half by 20 or 30%. So that was kind of the revelation over the next number of months and years. Hopefully that answers your question.
Tell me something, just out of curiosity. That friend or that client that you had that lost, as you said, everything. Was it valuation wise, meaning in terms of his properties because they were too much high risk, C class, etc. And meaning what was his option at the time that he could have done before we get into the deferred sale?
I think it was a mix between three things. Number one, he was too highly leveraged. In fact, we train and coach and we talk to our clients that if you never sell and you only ever refinance up to 50% LTV and you just buy properties, that's a great way to not only not pay any tax because refinancing is not taxable, right? But also to keep yourself from getting into trouble in case, especially if it's multifamily investments. Now, if you're single tenant, right? If you're retail, if you're office, especially, everything is market specific, but you got to be careful there. But for multifamily, the general rule of thumb, if you only ever leverage up to 50% and you only ever just refinance and buy more, it's actually pretty simple to build a lot of wealth, right? For him, he had done multiple 1031 exchanges, and part of the 1031, which is you got to remember, is you have to replace equal or greater value. Which also means equal or greater debt if you have debt that you're having out. Right,
increased debt. Yeah.
So it seems like you're always buying and bringing on more debt, and then if the music stops and you get caught, and obviously one of the worst markets ever, then that was the second thing. The market absolutely shifted. Banks froze up, and banks started putting pressure on people. Then you had coupled with a marketplace that lost so many jobs that a lot of tenants stopped paying rent. Right. Now you have these three things going against you. The last one, I guess he said he didn't have diversification and liquidity. So we believe in today's marketplace, having diversification and liquidity and having your powder dry, ready to pounce on deals is the single best way to grow your wealth right now and to preserve your wealth. And that's what the Deferred Sales Trust allows you to do. We could have, had we known about it and had he executed on it, he could have sold at the peak. He could have paid off all of his debt. He could have deferred all of his tax. He could have put it into liquid investment grade securities. He could have hedged and protected. This is a lot of ifs, right? But this is part of how we help people map this out. And he could have waited. In fact, someone actually did this. In 2006, a gentleman sold a $20 million asset. And this is one of the foundational stories for my clients and for myself of why I started the company. And this guy hates the stock market. He loves 1031 exchanges. He's worth about $200 million at the time. He sells a $20 million asset. He looks around with his 1031 binoculars. He's like, this doesn't make any sense. He parks the funds into the Deferred Sales Trust. And 5 years later, he puts it into, very conservative investments that were hedged and protected because he's not a big stock market guy either. So even when the market crashed, he was hedged and protected. He didn't lose a lot. He also didn't make a lot. He was kind of even. But 5 years later, the property that he sold, the bank foreclosed on it. And they call him up and they say, hey, we're curious. Do you want to buy it back? And he goes, well, maybe. What's the price? And they say about 60 cents on the dollar. And he said, sure, give me a couple of days. And he was able to work with the trust, to partner with the trust. Let me finish this last part, right? Partner with the trust to buy it back at 60 cents on the dollar, all tax deferred. Not using a 1031. Obviously, it's 5 years later. And he still hasn't paid capital gains tax on that. He sold hot, he bought low. So this is the Netflix. So once you understand that, most people will never go back to a 1031. Right? They'll only ever use the Deferred Sales Trust, but it does take time, education, getting to know us, getting to know the deals, how it can work, what the costs are, all of those things, the legal track record. But once you get it, most people never go back to Blockbuster.
You know what? I'll tell you what I want to do. I want to play a game, as we call it. Let's say I have a property, a multifamily property, a C-class property, very similar to what the other guy had. I have a 70% LTV, and I want to sell it. I don't want to do 1031 exchange for all the reasons that you applied, and I want to go for your solution. How do I do that? Where's the money going? If you can walk us through it and explain how it works.
Yeah, we just did a deal in New York. We did a couple deals in New York, but in particular, it was about a $2 million exit. Their basis was around, I think, 200,000. They've owned it for a long time. And so they had about a $1.8 million gain. And as you know, state, federal, Obamacare, let's just use 40% was the tax. So we always wanted to find the problem. So they had a $720,000 tax liability problem. So they needed a capital gains tax solution to their problem. So he could have just 1031.
What type of property they had?
A $720,000 tax liability problem. right? Because what kind of property? Yeah, it was. I think it was. He had a couple properties. So this one was a duplex that he sold, right? And
Okay.
so
Sounds about right with the numbers. Yeah.
yeah. And he had a huge gain, and he had depreciated it over all the years, right? And so he had done 1031 exchanges. So it's the same thing, right? Remember, your depreciation
Right.
travels. Anyway, so we define the problem. So step one is we form a trust. Step two, we insert the trust into the purchase and sale agreement. We find a third-party buyer for $2 million. That's good right there. And upon the close of escrow, what's going to happen is going to be basically two closes. The first close is to the trust. The asset is sold to the trust, but it's sold on an installment note, which is known as a seller carryback. So my client carried paper basically for $2 million for the trust, 100% financing. And the trust sells the asset to the ultimate buyer, who brings the full $2 million of cash or gets a loan, doesn't really matter. But when the smoke clears, the buyer takes title as he normally would. The trust has the $2 million, and it's owed to the original seller. And it's typically structured at 10-year promissory notes, typically between 5 and 8% compounding interest rate. And it's typically 10-year term. Most of our notes are structured as interest-only payments. So that keeps that extra 720 working for the client. And it pays out slowly over time. Now, the client will pay tax slowly over time. The investments can be based upon their risk tolerance, based upon their dollar cost averaging strategy. We work with third-party financial advisors, but most of our real estate entrepreneur clients are buying their own deals when it makes sense. And/or they're going into hard money lending. They're lending the funds out, and they're working with multifamily syndicators who already have a huge track record and a huge team behind them, where they don't have to do it themselves. Because guess what? The baby boomers that are retiring, they're tired of the toilet trash liability, but they also don't want to give it all the way up to a Delaware statutory trust company that ties and locks up for typically 5, 7, maybe sometimes 10 years. No control, no liquidity, no diversification, huge fees. And by the way, I've done Delaware statutory trust, and they have their place. They can solve mortgage over basis challenges, and it's sometimes peaceful mailbox money, but the returns are typically around just 5%. But you can't really be an entrepreneur. You're not really diversified. You have no liquidity. You have no control. That's why it's still considered blockbuster, right? That's how we define this, or a Hollywood video, right? Maybe the one down the street, where we're Netflix because we give such flexibility for the client to be an entrepreneur, to grow their wealth. But we do it at their timing. There's no 45-day. There's no 180. There's no like-kind replacement requirement. There's no debt replacement requirement. We can also move funds outside of the taxable estate to eliminate estate tax. Okay, we just did a deal for a client who's worth $25 million. They were selling a $5 million asset in Colorado, and all of their $25 million was all in real estate. And their biggest thing was not just capital gains tax, it was eliminating estate tax. And so most people, either run out of time, run out of kids, or can't gift it away fast enough, or have to give it all the way to charity. With the Deferred Sales Trust Plus, we can move funds outside of the taxable estate in one single day without going into the gifting exemptions. And so these are the advanced tax strategies and team that we build around yourself, your clients, and we come in and we help to give stuff that's beyond just what most people would think is even possible.
Tell me something, the liquidity of this thing is there? Meaning, if I want to use the money, can I use the money, or is there rules that say, no, you cannot touch the money for X amount of days or stuff like that?
Yeah, so it depends on how we set it up, but generally speaking, you can use the money. It's your money, and you can take distributions up front. You can take large distributions and then monthly distributions, quarterly. Depends on how we structure it. Whatever you receive, you're going to pay tax on, right? So this is a deferral mechanism. So understand that. But a lot of our clients might delay payments for a year while they relocate from New York to Florida and establish residency in Florida. And now they're in that new tax state where the interest payments are ordinary income based upon the state you live in. A lot of clients from California do that to Nevada, or California to Florida, or Texas, or whatever. So that's one strategy that we kind of look at. Now, if you take a big distribution, you're going to, out of the principal, you'll pay cap gains tax on that. But most clients will just live off the interest payments. Now, the other question, or maybe what you're referring to, is, well, can I invest into whatever I want when I want? The answer is, yeah, you really can, but we do have some parameters that we build. For example, we want to keep at least 20% of the total trust funds in some kind of diversified, typically, dividend paying stock portfolio, safe, to have liquidity, we don't want to also overstress the trust because the trust has payments. Think of it like a C Corp, right? And think of it, you're like the CEO. My role is the trustee. People are curious and wondering. I'm a third-party unrelated trustee, which we can talk about here in a minute. And then there's a third-party financial advisor. And basically, we're coming to you with ideas. You're coming to the trust with ideas. And collectively, we're saying, how do we get the money back plus a 5 to 8% rate of return over this period of time? And most of our clients, like for example, another client in Alabama, he sold a $2.6 million business and he deferred all the tax, about $600,000. Then he partnered with the trust to build 70 multifamily units in Tennessee, a portion of it. It didn't, it couldn't pay for all of that, but he had another partner there. So the answer is yes. And it also depends on how we structure it. And there are some guidelines that we follow to stay within the rules of the tax strategy. So hopefully that answers your question.
Tell me something. If I understand correctly, let's say I did this whole thing. I moved to another state, or not. I sold the property, moved into the trust. Everything is fine. We divided the trust to a certain type of an investment fund, whatever it is, and then we kept it in the trust, kept the rest in the trust. And at a certain point, I say, okay, I want to go and buy this property in a completely different area. And according to what you said, the second the money leaves the trust, I have to pay taxes on it. Is there a way, if I buy another property, to move the money into the property and that would not pay taxes?
Yeah, let me clarify. The only time you pay taxes is when you receive a personal distribution to your personal bank account. But
got it.
Can you partner with the trust and form a new LLC and open up a business bank account where you're the managing member and you're the majority owner of that LLC and have an investment real estate property or some kind of business venture, all tax deferred? The answer is yes. So we call this lendership, right? So most people, when they hear this, they're like, well, okay, so I'm a lender. I get that, but isn't that going to limit what I can do and how I can do things? Well, if that was the only thing you were going to do it with, and some people do that, and they're just like, hey, I'm happy with the 5 to 8. But most of our entrepreneurial real estate clients say, I want to go make some more money when the deals make sense. So how do I do that,
Right.
Brett? Well, that's the way we come in and we structure and we help you through that. But the simple answer is you form an LLC. You partner with the trust. The trust typically puts up all of the money. Ask for a preferred return. And then you go and buy that property, right? You go invest into that business venture. We had a client who exited $5 million of Bitcoin. She bought it at 50K and it went to 50 million at 54,000 a coin. It's now obviously much lower. But at 54,000 a coin, she exited 5 million of that 50 million of Bitcoin into the Deferred Sales Trust. And I said, hey, why didn't you sell it before? She goes, Brett, the capital gains tax. I had 1.85 million of capital gains tax. And number two, I didn't have a great business venture until now. And the business venture she had was like a Khan Academy online technology company that can spread education and help kids learn faster. So she partnered with the trust. 4 of the 5 million went into this new business venture, right? And that was great because obviously the market has crashed since, right? At least she got out when she did, and she has it in a business venture. And this is part of why people were wondering, well, how is this legal? How is this good for the IRS? Well, guess in her scenario, how good it is. It's great. She exited 5 million. She's creating more jobs. She's creating educational content, a business. She didn't, lose 50 million, go down to, I don't know, maybe like
I love it.
10. You get it, right? Yeah.
Tell me something. Is there a point where a person would say, listen, I don't want to do that. A 1031 exchange is better? Meaning, what is the point where 1031 exchange comes in and say that's going to be a better solution for me at that point?
Yeah, let me be very clear. I'm still a multifamily broker. I'm with eXp Commercial, and we help people do 1031 exchanges all the time.
Right.
However, we do it on our terms. We don't do it on the seller's terms. And this is the beauty. We give them the ability to back out and say, Mr. Seller, I'll call your bluff. I don't need to do your 1031. I don't need to identify the Deferred Sales Trust. It's my backup plan already. I already have my team in place. I don't need to buy this deal. However, the reason they would buy the deal, to answer your question, they're going to buy the deal because the deal makes sense. The cash flow makes sense.
They
the
like the
intrinsic
deal.
value makes
Right.
sense. They would have bought it anyways, regardless of their tax deferral situation. And so buy it based upon the value, not letting the tax tail wag the investment dog all day long. But guess what? Those are kind of hard to find. Inventory is still pretty low. Now, sellers seem to be softening up a little bit and prices seem to be happening. So we do think there's some opportunities, but you don't want to force yourself to overpay in a higher interest rate environment where cap rates are still kind of, let's say, tempered from where they potentially could be in the next 6 to 12 months. And that's where the deferred sales trust gives you all the leverage and all the time that you need to make a great decision.
Right. For the most part, when actually the market is very high, which was a few months ago, that's the best timing. It seems like that. When you want to go and move your money around and you don't want to buy any property, you just want to keep that in a place where you want to use it at a certain point. That sounds to me like the best solution.
Yeah, or diversify. Just diversify. I mean, we do partial 1031 exchanges and partial deferred sales trust. We just help a client. He sold $10 million worth of land in Texas. He did a partial 1031 exchange into South Carolina, and then a partial 1031 exchange into Oklahoma, and then
Nice.
he did the rest of it into the deferred sales trust, right? So it was a third about, right? Into two different assets plus the deferred sales trust. So sometimes it's not just a one size fits all. It's really sitting down with someone, helping them clarify and have a tax flow and a cash flow mindset, clarify and build the team to help them execute what they're really trying to do. And then going out and just executing on that with us. So that's the key. It does take some time and energy. And sometimes it means moving from your existing team or until they're trained with us. We'll train people. We love to train and coach people on how to do this. This is what we're about. And so hopefully that answers the question or gives you some more insight on it.
Tell me something. Does that work only from an LLC or a C Corp or something like that? Or does it work also for a private person, meaning family?
Yeah, who does this work for? Yeah, who qualifies and who does this work for?
Exactly.
Or anyone who has an asset that is selling, it has at least $1 million net proceeds and $1 million gain. So there are some minimums, okay? $1 million net proceeds, $1 million gain. But it's really anyone who has an individual, a C Corp, an S Corp, an LLC, GP interest, carried interest, captive insurance, primary homes, cryptocurrency, businesses, investment real estate. It can save a failing 1031 exchange. In fact, if you're listening to this, you're going to want to sure to get with me and Isha to make sure that you have a qualified intermediary that will allow the deferred sales trust as a backup plan. Because if you don't, you're going to get in a position where I have people calling me and they say, my funds are with so-and-so QI company and they won't cooperate, Brett. I'm about to pay millions of tax and they won't, they don't want to cooperate with the deferred sales trust. I'm like, yeah, they don't want you to know about this. Never use them ever again. You're on 1031 jail. So yeah, we're super flexible. It works for partnership separations. We just did a $13 million deal in San Diego. And this particular property, so I can get the picture, it was a car wash. They built this thing from the ground up and all in at $4 million. And they were looking at a huge tax, and part of it, they wanted to separate the partnership a little bit. One of them wanted to go their own way. So one of them just paid their tax. The other three did the deferred sales trust, right? So not all the partners have to move. Here's another one. It's a $33 million deal. This is in Vegas. This is the 5th deal my client has done. David, you can hear his whole story. But 2 GPs did it and 1 LP did it. And the rest of the LP just paid their tax. So it's very, very flexible.
Nice. So I just want to tell our listeners that Brett just showed me 2 deals, meaning because you guys are listening, you're not watching. You can go to the YouTube channel, of course, and watch it. But he just showed me one deal of a car wash and another deal of what was it?
It was an apartment complex.
Yeah, apartment complex in Nevada. So beautiful story. I love that. Going forward, and I want to shift gears a little bit. Going forward for you. What's your next goal in terms of what you do with taxes, with multifamily, as a broker, et cetera, et cetera? What your own goals?
Yeah, I mean, the vision for the company is to have, train and coach the top 5% of commercial brokers, residential luxury agents, M&A advisors, CPAs across the country with this deferred sales trust over the next 10 years. We want to get the top 10,000 across the country. In particular, we want to be managing over $1 billion within 10 years. But we're really focused on some of the major crises that are going on in America, right? And those major crises have to do with the U.S. debt, have to do with multifamily housing, right? have to do with exiting and building a legacy for their families, and really having the solutions which it provides for what I call the 10 freedoms that the DST provides. And these happen to do with, retirement freedom, 1031 freedom, estate tax freedom, happens to do with location and time and energy freedom. It could be your legacy. It could be, partnership freedom. It could be new depreciation freedom. We have all these different things that you can tap into. Some people
There's so many
resonate
options.
with, yeah. So
I want to ask you a crazy question. How come it's not a known thing? 1031 exchange, one of the most, I guess, meaning everyone who's in real estate and CRE knows what 1031 exchange is. It's one of the most popular things. DST, not. And it seems like an unbelievable solution. How come?
good question. So it has been around for about 27 years now, and there has been thousands of closes, billions under management, over 20 no change IRS audits. For those who are on the inside with us, they know that, and it's become a foregone conclusion that it's legal, it works, it's legit. The biggest thing we found is there's 5,000 qualified intermediary companies, and they're running around with the banging the drum of the 1031, and they have their lobbyists to keep the 1031 from being eliminated from Congress.
I got it.
They've got all that. So that's number one. Number two is it is specialized and it is proprietary and it is protected. And that means that we don't want it to get into the wrong hands and for people to abuse it. We're very careful about who and who's able to even help people with it. Now, once you sign NDAs and you join us, no problem, right? We're happy to share all of that. But let me tell you one story to give you even more confidence. There's a gentleman named David Young. He ran with a guy named Bill Gross, and they built PIMCO from 80 billion to 1.2 trillion. They're one of the most respected money managers in the world. Well, along with 5 other guys, they all retire. They get a big payday years ago. Well, they form David and 5 other guys form a group called Anfield Capital, and they reviewed the Deferred Sales Trust for a 2-year period of time. And they have their legal team look at it, and they fly back and they meet with the tax attorney who's one of my business partners, and they go through this whole thing for 2 years. And they came through with 2 conclusions. Number one, that might be the smartest person we've ever met, and that's the tax attorney who created the structure. I call him the Elon Musk of he's a tax attorney and a CPA. He's a genius. And number 2, we're all in. We'll put our name on this, and we'll become a part of the DST inner circle. So it's not the only reason to join us and look at it, but just realize there's national law firms. There's law firms in New York and New Jersey and CPA firms that are around for 50 years that do tens of thousands of tax returns. This is all happening, but most advisors just don't know about it. And a lot of QI companies and brokers want to keep you in the 1031 loop. And I can't blame them. I'm a broker myself, and we get big commissions when we do 1031 exchanges. So those are kind of the reasons I would say most people don't know about this.
Amazing. You guys heard it. I hope you guys learned something new today, because this is an amazing thing. And if you're a part of it or you're investing, you want to sell, and especially today, you might want to sell. You want to talk to Brett about this. Brett, thank you so much for being with us. I really appreciate it. Tell everybody how they can find you. If it's LinkedIn, if it's your website or anything, go ahead.
CapitalGainsTaxSolutions.com is the place where you can find the podcast, the new book that's coming out with Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank. He'll be in the book with some other really smart people that are really cool. I just try to get in the book. I try to get in the room with smart people, and I got in the book with some smart people. So I have a couple chapters too, but we have multifamily syndicators. We have David Young, who's in the book. Of course, a few other financial advisors as well. So you can check that out. That's CapitalGainsTaxSolutions.com. We also have our YouTube channel. You can go there now. We have the 7 questions you should ask of every single tax deferral strategy. So whether you're vetting us or anybody else, you should go there right now and look that up. That's Capital Gains Tax Solutions YouTube channel, and just search 7 questions. It'll pop up. You want to watch that for about 7 or 8 minutes, and you're going to be way ahead of the game for any kind of things that people bring to you, including us. Ask these tough questions. Find out the track record, and make sure you can build a team to help you achieve what you're trying to achieve.
And you guys can see the links above, below, wherever. Brett, thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate your time. Stick around. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. You guys, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a world of a new thing about taxes and how you can use your real estate or anything else, basically. It's like a world. It's unbelievable. It's a whole world of taxes and benefits. Brett, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
And you guys take care, and I'm going to see you.